Thanks for joining me for a Kick Up the Arts. I'm Nicola Meehan, and I am hearing in this episode from two brilliant women and minds who have joined forces to explore a wild and underdocumented and misunderstood chapter in Scottish history. In their superb new novella, This Door of the Seas, best-selling writer Val McDermid has teamed up with Geographer Royal for Scotland, Joe Sharp. They are partners in crime, they are partners in life, as they trace the journey and the tale of the Darien venture. It saw more than 2,000 Scots sail into the unknown at the end of the 17th century toward a horizon of hope and prosperity. But the challenges of Darien's jungle coastline at the junction of North and South America transpired to offer anything but that. It would eventually upturn the future of Scotland, bankrupting an already impoverished nation and propelling it towards political union with England. This Door of the Seas is the latest in Berlin's excellent Darkland tales, in which some of Scotland's best-loved writers reimagine stories from Scottish history, myth and legend through a contemporary lens. Val and I chatted about her Queen Macbeth Darkland tale in a previous episode of A Kick Up the Arts. Val and Joe's book is written as a series of letters home from expedition scientist Dr. James Wallace, as addressed to his wife, Eliza, and to Sir Robert Sibbald, the very first Geographer Royal, and as uncovered by his ancestor Beth Wallace in the spring of 2026. If you fancy hearing Joe and Val chat more about This Door of the Seas, you can catch them live at the Edinburgh International Book Festival on August the 17th, and as a Tidelines Festival taster event at Irvin's Harbour Arts, that's on August the 20th. Val's also my guest with Justin Curry and Long Leg, that's at Edinburgh International Book Festival on August the 23rd. We're going to be celebrating the wonder of David Bowie, as you do. That is sold out, but I would love you to join me for a Kick Up the Arts at the Edinburgh International Book Festival on August the 25th. We're going to be in the Spiegel tent. We're going to have live music and conversation from the incredible Catherine Joseph, Lomond Campbell and Kirsten Innes. For now though, back to Val McDermid and Joe Sharp and This Door of the Seas. I think I first heard about this, I think maybe we were talking, Val, about Queen Macbeth at the time, and wonderful Joe Sharp was maybe even in the audience. We were at Porty Books.
Aye.
And the rumour started that there might be another Darkland tale. But Joe, I'd love to know from your perspective and memory, at what point this story, this adventure, struck a chord, because there's a real intersection of both of your lives and loves and landscape, but it's a mystery as well, isn't it? I mean, we think we know about this story, but do we really?
Well, to be honest, I didn't really know much about it at all. I don't remember ever being told about it at school.
Yeah.
And it all started because last year I was invited to speak at Winter Words in Pitlochry. And they wanted me to speak as Geographer Royal for Scotland and to talk about geography in Scotland. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to have to make this into an interesting story. So I went back to the first Geographer Royal, a guy called Robert Sibbald, who was, I feel, such an underachiever in comparison. He was not just the Geographer Royal for Scotland, but he was the King's Physician, and he also co-founded the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh.
Just in his day off.
Just in his day off, yeah. And that was in 1682, and so I read about him and discovered that he was appointed to set up an atlas of Scotland to find out about the resources and the people of the country. And he did that he didn't actually go anywhere. He just contacted all his mates and said, tell me what it's like where you are, which I thought was an interesting way of doing it. And I then discovered that a few years later, he sent someone off to Darien as part of this Darien scheme, and he wanted that person to report back and tell him what it was like. And I thought, gosh, I've heard vaguely about this, but I don't know very much about it.
Yeah. So
I looked into it, and it's, as Val said, the way it was initially described in some of the accounts, it sounded like an episode of Blackadder. I mean, basically, the Scots were just useless. Yeah. Everything that they could do wrong, they did do wrong. And I have to admit, at that talk last year, I played up on the humorous potential of it. But I kept thinking there has to be more to the story than that. And so I started looking into it. And then fast forward a few months, and we were coming back from a holiday up in the northwest of Scotland, and we were quite a long drive back.
Interminable A9.
Indeed. And so
it's about 2 seconds from us here, by the way, Bridge of Allen.
And so we were chatting away on the way back, and I was telling you some of the things I'd found out, and I said, I feel it's a story that more of us should know about. so key to Scotland's history. It's so key to the history of Great Britain. And I said, I don't know how to write it. I think it would make a brilliant story.
Mm. And I just said, well, why don't we do it together?
And before she got together, I said yes. And that was it. She wasn't getting out of it.
But before the end of the journey, we'd already decided that the best way to tell this story was as a series of letters home, as it were. Because that allowed us to tell the bits of the story that were important without getting caught up in the stuff that's frankly boring.
I think also what's really lovely about that is, you know, for so many of us that you're mentioning, you know, what history was to you at school, Joe, and what history, especially Scottish history, right? Even more weirdly, you know, the closer it is, I grew up in Stirling, and I didn't really know that much about things which were on my doorstep. But the humanising of it, you know, getting the interior of it, understanding perhaps or imagining what's going on in someone's mind and their love and their hope and their destitution, you know, I think to have that firsthand, and that's a wonderful thing about the way the Darklands tales, and also the way kind of something like this, which is a historical, if you like, novella can work, Val. You can really dig deep on the personal aspect while hanging on to the research that was there already.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we all grow up with in Scotland is a series of tales.
It is tales. Yeah.
Historical tales rather than actual history.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things behind the Darkland Tales series, is to actually dig down and find out what really happened.
Yeah.
So we can not so much rewrite history, but actually dig away the rubbish and find the history underneath. And for me, I knew almost nothing about Darien. I vaguely remember it being mentioned in the history lesson at school, but no details. For me, it was kind of like the South Sea bubble or something, you know.
Yeah, totally.
And I didn't know any of the details. And hearing Joe talk about it made me realise it was a really good story to be told. That it wasn't Blackadder. It was actually a much more significant story than that. And it was a story that had reverberations beyond the event itself.
Absolutely.
It still has reverberations now, arguably.
Yeah.
That was one of the exciting things about it, because once you start uncovering the facts of history, you can start drawing the lines of history. You can tell this led to that, and that led to that, and a tangent that led to that.
Yeah, quite. I think that's something I love about the idea of geography and cartography. Okay, in any way, you know, in that you do get this picture of something, and the more information you can get from the past, but also the more you can maybe apply your own understanding of the bits that are missing from that. For example, women's voices and any representation of women, and maybe going, what would they be thinking at that point, but also having a grounding in absolute fact, if you like, as much as it is, because even the research and even the sources are conflicting in their records, aren't they, Joe?
They are, and that was the interesting thing. So I did the majority of the research because Val had open heart surgery last year.
Inconveniently, I know.
That was a very good excuse, Val.
Got me off the hook for a lot of stuff last year.
And there was only so much time that I could be by her bedside, you know, mopping her brow and that sort of thing. So when she was asleep, I would look at the sources, and we're really lucky. There's a lot of material, and most of it has been digitised, so it can be accessed anywhere.
Brilliant.
And there's first-hand accounts, and there's quite a lot of accounts. But what it appears is that rather than looking at some of the original resources, a lot of the history that has been taken as the truth, instead of looking at those facts, had actually looked at a series of pamphlets. And at the end of this period, we can only imagine this was a kind of early 18th century version of Insta. So various different people came back and wrote pamphlets, either completely lampooning the Scots, and then that was held up as being, you know, it was treasonous and it was burnt, and then alternative pamphlets were written, and then they were called as being treasonous as well. So there was this great pamphlet war. But there was one pamphlet in particular written by Walter Herries, who'd originally gone on the first expedition but had left early, and he was probably an English spy. He was a fairly horrible person who'd potentially killed his previous captain and then ended up on this. And he said the Scots were ridiculous, that they'd gone to the tropics with wigs, woolen goods and Bibles, and that's all they took with them. And it seemed that most historians had used that account. And then there's been a much more recent piece of academic research that actually went and had a look at what the cargo manifests were. And yes, of course, there was all those things, which, to be fair, they were planning to trade all the way up to the coast of North America. They imagined that they were going to have access to those trade routes. But they brought all sorts of other things as well. People just hadn't bothered looking at those sources.
It was as if you'd taken the sun as the story. The Falklands War as told by the sun as being history.
And then the more it's repeated, the more it's reduced.
Yeah.
And then it just does become a bit of a, not just a stereotype, but a laughing stock.
Yeah.
And it was, as you say, the reverberations politically, socially were, and I think also at the heart of this story, and you can maybe chat about the way in which you wanted to take particular viewpoints. It's a love story, and it is about the dire situation that people found themselves in Scotland. To go to somewhere they didn't know where they were going, Joe. Right? This is wild.
I know, it's unbelievable when you read it that the vast majority of there was about 1,200 went on each of the two expeditions. There were some soldiers and other military men and some of the second sons of lairds who were there. We can maybe come back to talk about them, but the vast majority were colonists who were not getting a salary, who were promised a bit of land once things were set up, but did not know where they were going. And I just can't imagine that.
Yeah.
Because we even travelling today, you're going across great oceans where you can't see any land for days at a time is quite terrifying. What it must have been like.
Can you imagine what it'd be like? You go to sea and you've never been out of sight of land all your days. And suddenly all you can see around you is sea, empty sea, an empty sky, and no sense at all of knowing where you're going, what kind of place you're going to. I mean, it must have been terrifying.
And yet, what struck me was the hope.
Yes.
Hope was almost the place, if you like. It sounds kind of cliche, but in a way it's like, what are you investing in here? This other, better, hopeful Eden, and of course it transpired to be anything but.
Yeah.
But if you like, the intention.
I wonder if this is where we originally got the Scottish slogan of "It's the hope that kills."
There are a few. It's like a parcel of rogues, of course. There are so many kind of details and reference points which are embedded in this venture, and it's wild. And I wonder for you, Val, because obviously you decided it was going to be letters, okay, and Joe's done the research. And was it important that you delved into this kind of like personal, that you had the freedom of a little bit of fiction and imagination, if you like? Because in a way you can get closer, as we've discussed before, to the truth that way. Yeah,
I've written novels before which have had some sections set in the past.
Yeah.
And one in particular, The Grave Tattoo, which is about William Wordsworth and Fletcher Christian meeting at school and becoming friends. Then years later, there's a story that Fletcher Christian did not die in Pitcairn, but that he came home to England. And from this, I drew the idea of him getting together with Wordsworth, and Wordsworth being fascinated by this story and writing a long poem. And this poem, of course, couldn't be published because by that time Fletcher Christian had a price on his head. So I wrote a contemporary thriller about this missing manuscript. And I thought, part of me thought, this is nonsense, this is mad. And I went off to see Robert Wolfe, who at the time was running the Wordsworth Centre in the Lake District. Wonderful. And I told Robert all about this and what I'd done and what I was doing. And he listened very carefully and he said, and smiled and nodded and said, "It's charmingly plausible." And that has been my watchword for writing anything historic now. It's charmingly plausible.
Yeah. How absolutely wonderful. Now, the charming plausibility, however, has to pass the Joe test, I would imagine. Okay, so you can maybe remind us, we've spoken about it before, because we spoke about Queen Macbeth on an earlier episode of I Kick Up the Arts. Sometimes research or the imagination can take what you think is a well-grounded flight of, I don't want to say fancy.
Well, it's fancy.
Fiction, right?
It's fancy.
And it transpires to be completely unusable within the historical realm. So I think there was an issue with paper, for example.
Yeah, when I wrote Queen Macbeth, I had one crucial plot point where one character has to communicate with another across a distance, and I had them writing letters to each other, as you would. Totally. And I handed in my first draft, and Hugh Andrew at Berlin sort of nodded and said sagely, "The only problem with this is that in Scotland there was no paper in the 10th century." So I had to go away and rethink that element of plot. But you always have to find a workaround.
Yeah.
That's the great thing about all these years of writing fiction. I can usually find a workaround.
Yeah.
So what I think the key thing for us was that I came up with a detailed timeline to start with, and then we spent a long time discussing how the structure of the story was going to work. And for us, a lot of the narrative tension came from the time it took for letters to get backwards and forwards between Darien and Scotland, and there was all sorts of shipwrecks and all sorts of problems that meant that characters did not know what other characters knew.
Yeah.
And I think once we got that nailed down, as long as we stuck within the confines of that, then I think we could be, hopefully we were confident in the structure. I know what you can say to me.
It wasn't just the characters who didn't know what was happening elsewhere. we're sitting down about to start writing, and we're planning out how the story was going to play out. And Joe said something along the lines of, and that was when the murder happened. I said, murder? Murder?
I may have forgotten to write that down.
You never mentioned a murder.
Was it important?
Well, but what is it I do?
It was just known, right? It was there. It was in
She
the
just
ether.
didn't mention it.
I do think it's wonderful that the kind of, the last Dartlands tale, you were like, can I write letters? No, I can't. Everything did come full circle. You're like, okay, this time the letters work. Do you know one of the things I really love about the letters and the way in which from very early on, because we first meet a family member, much younger, of someone who was writing the letters. And it's this reference that as time goes on, maybe he's not even so convinced that the letters are going to reach anybody. Okay, It's the recording of them. It's the writing it down. So it just made me think so much about, yes, there is a complete communication of it, but there isn't actually there's not a loop there, if you like. We don't know till very late on if other letters have been returned or even read. And that's fascinating, just the fact of making the record in the first place, Joe, seems to be like so vital to the human condition, weirdly.
I think that's true. And after we just about finished writing this, and I went to the National Library of Scotland, where they have some of the original letters. It was astonishing.
Yeah.
This is such an amazing resource we have in Scotland. And I was just able to, anyone can do this. I was able to go in, request it up in the Rare Resources room, and went up there, and it's all well and good sort of seeing the words that have been scanned in, but actually having the real thing in front of you, this paper that had gone to Panama and come back, and just seeing the hope that was written into that, and whether the person who wrote it lived or died, I can't be sure. I suspect he didn't make it.
But
it was incredibly emotional seeing the thing.
Yeah.
This piece of paper that travelled halfway around the world.
I think also there is some sense of believability, if you like it. And again, Beth says at some point, I'd kind of heard about these stories, but until I saw it written down, I didn't necessarily believe it. And there is something, isn't there? It's funny even now about the veracity of the page and words on the page, Val, that's just really powerful. That's emotional, really. We have an emotional connection to it.
It's a contemporaneous recording of something. Back when I was a journalist, we didn't really have, we recorded, we didn't have phones to record things on. So you wrote things down in shorthand. And the crucial thing was always, when if the lawyer's question, he said, I've got a contemporaneous note. I wrote this down at the time. Here's a note of the conversation, me and the person I was talking to. And that carried weight. That carried weight in a courtroom, not just in a conversation.
But it's also, it's just seeing you say that, it also has a kind of meaning when we're reconstructing particular times. I think about when you're talking about doing your nines, the 1979-89. Yes, you can look at the history that, is telling the story from where we are now, so there's that sense of a kind of linearity. But what you found most productive and helpful is going down and looking at the local newspapers from that time, because those are stories that don't necessarily have a kind of end point, but that it's what matters at the time.
Exactly, because when you're writing recent history, particularly, the big events, you know when the war happened, or when that person became prime minister, or when that happened. But what you don't know is how much was a pint of lager, what was on the pictures, what people were talking about in the bus queue, and you find that in the local papers, and it's the same thing. It's there. It's the fact. It's what people were talking about. What had an impact in their lives.
Yeah. But I don't think it is just more recent history. I think what I think can be quite powerful about historical writing is that when you're writing about that period, we don't have that certainty about where history's going. At the moment, we can look back, we read the history books and we think, this happened in Darien, therefore we had Union, therefore Scotland's never quite strong enough to go it alone. We've carried that with us ever since. But you look at the moment, and there's so many small things that could easily have tipped that story into a different direction. And I think it's quite powerful because it opens up history, it opens up possibility, it challenges that idea that there was an inevitability to us being where we are at the moment. Yeah. And I think particularly at the moment where politics is, we need as much possibility for opening up alternatives that we can find.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about this particular story, this particular episode in their history, is that it started at a convention of pirates. I mean, a pirate conference somewhere in the West Indies, and this guy William Patterson was spun a yarn by a pirate.
That's when I sold you the story.
So I think that's when the story. Yeah. This is wild.
Yeah, I've got to say,
the nation's future hang in the balance, and William Patterson went to a convention of pirates. I mean, it's like Pirates of the Caribbean. If you took Pirates of the Caribbean as a Bible,
Totally. I know, but was that the thing? Did you know? Could you just see Val's eyes light up at that point?
I think
do you know there was a pirate convention?
Pirate convention, murder. What else do you need?
But I mean, it's like something that was Robert Louis Stevenson, and God knows Robert Louis Stevenson was one of our greatest writers.
Yeah,
and I think, in a way, it wasn't quite so stupid. I mean, it was never going to be a plantation settlement, a plantation colony. There wasn't this idea about taking the land and that producing the wealth. It was about trade. Totally. And the Scots were looking to the Dutch as a kind of role model, if you like. The Dutch, like the Scots, didn't have much to sell, so they used their trading abilities to start generating income through their expansion. So the location was quite smart. It's just William Patterson was sold a bit of a lemon in the fact that he was told it would take a couple of days to go across the isthmus. It was always a bit more challenging than that. But your favourite fact about the longer term impact of this, Stobo's ancestor.
Oh yes, sorry, yes. My favourite fact,
yes, there you go,
about the whole of the adventure, if you like, was the ragtag and bobtail that were left at the end were making their way back up the coast of East America, and they stopped at Charleston for all sorts of reasons, like
the ships fell
apart. But there was a problem in Charleston at the time because the minister had left or died. We're not quite sure which. He died. Apparently, my colleague is telling me he died. And the congregation had no minister. And one of the people on the boats who had actually managed to get away at that point was left over was a minister, the Reverend Stobo. So the Reverend Stobo stepped up to the pulpit and became the minister in Charleston in America. And one of his ancestors is Teddy Roosevelt, who was the president who was actually responsible for the building of the Panama Canal.
Oh, come on. Talk about full circle.
Yeah. Totally. I just love that. It's fabulous.
But that's what happens when you tell a story and you dig deeper on the detail rather than just again and again and again kind of perpetuating the very, very shorthand. You get all sorts of details, but you're right, I was looking for a quote. So I'd even taken it down because there's the hope of it. It's such a prized strategic location. Yeah. No one was going into this, they were in one way blind because they didn't know where they were going. But the planning was meticulous and did... I mean, you can maybe talk a little bit about the cartography of it and even the maps, because there are some maps within it. Did you always love maps? Geography, Joe? Like, was this always a love of yours?
Absolutely not. And in fact, I spend a lot of time telling people that geography is not just about maps. And what do I do with the first work of fiction that we put together? We put maps in. I love a story with a map in it, though. I've always loved that.
It helps us. I think it's a really good visual aid for literature, for history, for geography. I don't necessarily think it's just about geography, but I think there is something about allowing us to process and visualise and understand a place and a time.
Yes, it's always really interesting what goes onto a map, because there's always choices made, and with the two maps we included, one is a bit of a amalgam of a lot of the maps that do exist with what we said at the end, a little bit of artistic
I love
license.
that.
And then the other one, because that's the kind of formal map he sends back to his sponsor. And then I was thinking, but whenever I go somewhere, I send him back going, this is where I was staying, and this is and so we kind of domesticated one for sending off to his wife as well.
Even I've used a map in a book. I mean, years ago, I wrote a book called A Place of Execution, and it's centred in a small village in the Derbyshire Peaks.
Yeah.
And to make sense of it myself, I sort of drew this rough, crude map, sort of block houses, this is so-and-so, this is so-and-so. And I've included this with the first draft of the book, thinking that they would get somebody to draw it properly. And when they went ahead and published it with this stupid, looks like it was drawn by a 5-year-old.
I hope you got like an illustrator's fee as well, right?
No, they just
took
had me over.
Just ripped you off, ripped
totally.
off your artistic integrity.
That's my version of a map, which is shameful.
I feel like there's something about it within this book and within so many books. It brings you in. Yeah. Okay, there's something about it, and also the detail. You're right. It opens up a whole story and a history and a political situation that isn't necessarily really understood or discussed that often, but it's also about the detail. And again, I wondered about the research, because for me the idea of the letters, which are so personal, but also the nature, the vegetation, the flying fish and the custard apples and those details.
I love that bit, and I mean there was two reasons to put that in.
Okay.
One was just that the descriptions were fantastic, and the letter that we've included, the excerpt, which is a series of questions that we suggested that the Geographer Royal was asking James Wallace to talk about, actually came from a letter. We couldn't find one from Sibbald, but it was someone that Sibbald corresponded with, who sent it on the second expedition with a different scientist. So it was a genuine letter, and so it was fascinating just seeing the language, but also we really wanted to remind the reader of what was known, what was understood at the time, because we were trying all the way through this to try and get the right balance between writing as someone would at the time, whilst being understandable to a contemporary reader. And we didn't, this is pre-Enlightenment.
Yeah.
And I think it really adds to the sense of my wonder at people going off and doing this, because their understanding of nature was so limited in all sorts of ways. The idea that the preeminent scientist and co-founder of the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh, we asking if there was a tree that if you sat underneath it you might die because of the smell, or another one that if you touched it would shrivel away, and that there might be a race of people covered in white fluff, and the kind of things that seem utterly bizarre to us were science. And so it helps to understand, I think, how people were navigating this landscape. So we thought it was fun and kind of exotic, but at the same time it positioned our protagonist in terms of what he could possibly know and how he would understand it.
And you touched on the subject of language there, and this happening when it did was really quite crucial for the way we were able to tell the story. I mean, the story starts in 1698. If you look back 100 years from that, 1598, you're in the middle of Shakespeare, Marlowe, Fletcher, and Forsooth. And Shakespearean language can be quite difficult for the modern reader to follow, to understand. But by a century later, the language had become much closer to the way we speak now. So I was just digging deep into Daniel Defoe's During the Plague Year and Robinson Crusoe to get the kind of rhythms of the speech in my head. And it's very much more straightforward. Early modern English. I also spent a lot of time on Google doing the etymologies. Did that word exist then?
Val kept saying you can't use that word. You didn't use it.
Didn't exist till 1803.
It's brilliant.
So I mean, whereas now we look at something that was written 100 years ago in the early 20th century, and we understand it perfectly. But there was a big gap between what was the way that people spoke and wrote at the end of the 17th century to the way they spoke and wrote at the end of the 16th.
I think that's fascinating that you managed to hit on something that even linguistically worked within the realms of a story that you might both want to work on together, right? You just kind of struck gold, which ironically and alas they did not.
They did not.
You collaborated on an anthology before, and of course again this comes back to this a similar thing. Imagine a country. What was the process? How different was the process? Like, what were you actually sitting? Do you sit near each other at a desk? Were you writing each other, if you like, letters about the book? How did it work?
No, we'd originally thought that I would probably write the scientific letters and Val would write the more emotional, personal letters. I think partly because we both thought I would be a bit rubbish at writing anything else. And it turned out that I'm not quite as rubbish as we both thought. And
very good.
And in fact, it started off, I started doing the writing just because Val was still very much in a recovery, but we'd spoken, we talked, we had the advantage that we spend a lot of time together, particularly when she's in bed recovering from heart surgery. So we really had a good sense of where we were taking it before either of us started writing. So I started and then handed it over to Val, and then it really depended on who was available from day to day who did it. And I don't think you can see the joins, but
I don't think so. I mean, I think one of the things, I had to, Jo's an academic. She can't help it. She writes sentences that are a paragraph long. So much of what I had to do in terms of editing was cut these paragraphs down to 4 sentences. Put in full stops and commas and semicolons and make it flow more readily.
Punctuation, please.
Yes, yeah.
Right. Okay.
But that was really the one big flaw with your writing that I could come up with. You write well. I hate you.
It's written as one entity without a question, even though there are different. I think particularly it's interesting. It's also about who you're speaking to and who you're writing to.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's the letter writer who's writing to different people. Okay, as opposed to us hearing different voices. Yeah. And I just think that's such a lovely insight as well, because I don't know, there's something about the unknown and where they were going, but also the unknown and where the letters were they even arriving.
Yeah.
The way in which we still need to speak to people, even if we don't know if they're hearing us.
Yeah.
Is wild.
Yeah. I think because our letter writer, James, he thought it was important that there be a record.
Yeah.
That it was important that somebody laid it down.
Yeah. And he in fact did publish. He published his initial observations. So he was a real person, and he did publish his initial observations in the Transactions of the Royal Society in London. Mm-hmm. So we don't know what happened to him beyond that. That's then our imagination. We're pretty sure he survived.
Yeah.
He clearly again it was that. There was kind of emotional reasons for writing a letter, but also science at that point was about collecting knowledge. I mean, it wasn't very well structured or systematized. It was about we need to know enough. We need to know about the world. We need to record everything that we can.
Mm-hmm. And that ragtag and bobtail that survived the disasters of the colony and made their way up the coast of America and ended up in Boston and New York, just at the time when people were sitting around in coffee houses, absorbing the early ideas of the Enlightenment. John Locke's ideas were making their way across the Atlantic, and they were having these conversations about what's the meaning of life. How do we structure our societies?
Yeah.
And to have come back from that desolate adventure to find a world where people were still excited and talking about a future, a different future.
Yeah.
I mean, it must have been so. I mean, in some respects quite galling, but in other respects quite exciting.
Yeah.
So that even though this didn't work, there's still a future where things will work and will change.
Yeah, and also the way things were.
Yeah.
With the reference of everything that had happened, I don't want to. I mean, I know we kind of know what happens in this story, but I don't want to spoil any of the wonderful storytelling kind of elements of it. But maybe letters arrived the other way, and maybe the life back there and the tea rooms back there now no longer hold the same kind of sway or romance or the day-to-day, because things have changed, so it is that there's an element of you got to just keep moving forward.
And I mean, you said earlier that it's a bit of a love story. I think there's actually, I don't know if we've talked about this, but I think there's actually 2 love stories in this, and I think actually the more powerful love story in some ways is between James Wallace and William Patterson.
Yes.
And that's why we ended it the way that it did, because I think that was the biggest heartbreak.
It's a betrayal.
Absolute betrayal.
Yeah.
And then we suddenly realised, as Val said, that there was this link to this emerge. I mean, it wasn't. We didn't quite have the founding fathers at that point, but we weren't far off that point. And I look back to when Wallace would have been doing his training in Leiden, and that was exactly when John Locke was there, publishing his work about the divine right, the end of the divine right of kings. So, given everything that's gone, that had happened, and you know, we do see the class issue in this story very powerfully, and I think this is something that sticks with us in Scotland, a kind of a healthy cynicism towards the landed.
Well, yes, because on the reference within there's the upstairs, downstairs, even on the and who has the food and who has the water, and and that's made very clear. That this was not an even keel.
Absolutely not, and that's very clear in the record.
And and now here we have, just a couple of weeks ago on the Royal Mile, the crowds chanting "Not my king," which we would not have gone amiss at the time.
There are a few lines to that very, very point in there. I think that's why it's interesting, because it is a history that we do or do not know. Definitely want to read the book and definitely want to read about, but also a lot of resonances that are not so far from home. That's the kind of sad but truthful thing about it.
I'm also thinking, we're also hoping that Americans might appreciate the Nay King's attitude as well.
That's right, of course. It's all there. But it's a wonderful book, and there's also one of my favourite dedications of the last little while. For our crews, the fun-loving crime writers and the geographers of St Andrews University. Who's more rock and roll, the geographers?
Obviously.
Oh yeah. I'll take them on my next tour for the backing band.
No, that's it. You can do 2 sets.
Yeah.
Right, you can do your prog rock set as well. So you're at Edinburgh International Book Festival, you're at Tidelines. I'll put other dates that I can find online. What's next?
Well, I've got a book to deliver by Christmas because I'm contracted to deliver it. So I better get my skates on and write 1999.
The news never sleeps. Oh, really? So that's
1999 is next.
Amazing.
Yes.
Right, okay, to go back to that,
So,
moving decades. Has it been interesting for you doing this different form of, Val was saying, and you were saying it's a different type of writing, or maybe a different approach to writing for you, Joel? Like, has that shone a little bit of a light on something?
It has. It's something, because I've had the great advantage of hanging around a lot of book festivals with Val in the last few years. I've realised how effective storytelling is in terms of communicating messages. As an academic, I tend to draw on the facts. As Val says, I tend to write long sentences, usually because by the end of the sentence I'm telling you why you should believe the same thing I'm believing, and here's 24 references to prove it. Well, except it's not persuasive. And one of the things that I think, it's interesting how many academics are beginning to look towards storytelling, because at the moment the facts aren't cutting through.
Okay.
All the facts tell us that climate change is human derived, that we need to act soon. We know there's all sorts of facts about inequalities that just are not cutting through in public discourse. So we need to find a different way to communicate a message. So I found this really fascinating, and I do have another piece of research that I've been working on for some time that I think could be more effectively told as a story. So watch this space.
And she's had a 6-month masterclass.
I can't believe you say that publicly.
True.
Might make that as a little kind of like advert. Anyway, no, listen, and thank you so much. Lovely to see you here. Lovely to see you in Bridgefallen. Loving this. I'm loving its tactile as well.
Such a gorgeous cover.
Is it still exciting to get, obviously, whether it's an academic publication or a beautiful Darklands tale, like the books are always just like...
Yeah. Joe got a little bit overexcited when the box arrived,
But there is, it's that tactile thing. It's that whole. I mean, obviously we've had the PDF.
Yeah.
We've looked at it endlessly, but there's something about holding it in your hand that is just.
And even after 40 novels and lots of other publications, it's still exciting.
Yeah.
It's still a beautiful moment.
It's amazing. So you're going to be doing those things, and we're going to see you back. Are you going to come through for Bloody Scotland as well?
Oh,
Val's going to be here with Denise Minor?
Absolutely, wouldn't miss that.
Party time.
Yes.
Every day's party time.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to let you guys go because you need to go get your groceries.
Well, thank you so much. It's been
Thank
lovely
you.
to talk to you.
I know.
It's been a joy.
Thank you so
As
much.
always.
Thank you.
It's been great.
Thanks so much again to Val McDermid and Joe Sharp for shining a light on this Door of the Seas, which is out on August the 6th via Berlin's brilliant Darkland Tales series. If you fancy hearing Joe and Val chat more about this Door of the Seas, you can catch them at Edinburgh International Book Festival on August the 17th, and there's a Tidelines Festival taster event at Irvin's Harbour Arts, that's on August the 20th. Val's also my guest with Justin Curry and Longleg at Edinburgh International Book Festival on August the 23rd. We're celebrating the wonder of David Bowie. That is sold out, but I'd love you to join me for a kick up the arts at the Edinburgh International Book Festival, because on August the 25th, in the Spiegel tent, I'll have live music and conversation from the brilliant Catherine Joseph, Lomond Campbell and Kirsten Innes. You can listen back to Val's chat about Queen Macbeth, her earlier Darkland tale, on a kick up the arts if you fancy. We recorded that live at the wonderful Porty Books last year. And if you're a fan of crime fiction, Val is going to be in conversation with the wonderful Denise Mina. That's at Bloody Scotland in September in Stirling, my hometown. I cannot wait for that. I'm chairing various events at Bloody Scotland as well, with writers including Chris Brookmeyer, Abir Mukherjee and Matthew Sweet. There's loads more information online. Before that, it's Butte Noir this weekend at the glorious Glenburn Hotel in Rothesay. I'm going to be chatting with Marissa Haitzman and G.R. Halliday, among others. I cannot wait. That kicks off this Friday, August the 7th. If you're in Edinburgh meanwhile and you fancy some festival antics, I'm going to be writing an arts diary for the Herald every Thursday through August, so grab a paper or subscribe online if you want to hear some of my highlights. And last thing, I promise you can listen back to Val McDermid on my Central FM radio show, The Saturday Social. I do it live every weekend. Just search online, go to the on-demand section and she'll be there. Just like that, there are also shows with the Bluebells, Johnny Watson, Horse, Gavin Mitchell and more. Thank you as ever for listening, for sharing, for getting in touch, for all of that. Come to a live event, come to the book festival. Bye for now.